Hi, my name is, as Mary Beth just let you know, is Maureen McGlame, and I am delighted to be here at her invitation. She asked me at one point in time if I would be willing to participate in a webinar and share some of my experience with you all. And I was I was grateful to her for the invitation. And it's also, I must say, been quite an amazing experience for me just getting ready for this. It's something that I haven't done, and what I've given thought and had discussion with Mary Beth about how to put this together, and I've decided to start obviously at my beginning. I'm from Boston and work in the field of recovery. Have worked in the field of recovery for many years. But as a child, I grew up in a family where one of my parents had an alcohol use disorder. And that is where obviously it all began for me in terms of the profound history I've had as someone who's been impacted by this illness, personally, professionally, and in every way throughout my life. So I'm really happy to be with other people who share an experience to mine, and I hope that I can be useful to you through talking about my particular journey. As I said, I'm from Boston, and I'm the oldest girl in a family of 10 children. And I came from a wonderful family. We didn't have any we lived well. We lived in a wonderful town. And my parents were they were delightful people who wanted a large family. And everybody was busy all the time, as you can imagine, with bringing up 10 children. But in childhood, my mother, who we weren't aware early on, when she had alcohol, something different happened with her. And what happened to her is she would have the alcohol and it would impact her so that she didn't take much for her to not be able to function. She was really chemically dependent from the first time she had alcohol. So I grew up with the experience of having amazing parents and great brothers and sisters, but having a mom who had an illness, and no one ever said that that's what it was. We just lived that way, and she would periodically have alcohol, and it would completely knock her out of commission for several days. She would have it and could not stop having it. And we knew that this was happening, that it was trouble when we came around the corner after school and saw the shade down in the bedroom, in my parents' bedroom. We knew that this was it when we went inside the house. And when we went in, she would be upstairs asleep and we would be together, all of us, and we would figure out what we needed to do. We would we'd press the button and automatically go into our roles and make things work without her contributing anything, because she could not contribute. She just wasn't present, that's all. So the story of my childhood basically was that when things were okay, they were okay, but when they weren't okay, everything stopped, and we were stand-ins, and I was like the surrogate mom and the surrogate spouse, because I happened to be the oldest daughter. And what we did was the best we could. We would contact my dad and let him know. And he never said to us, this is what this is. So we never understood it as children. We just knew that it was serious and that it wasn't safe and that we needed to take care of ourselves and watch out for her. And that's what we did. So that was the traumatic time in my childhood. we could get a sense before it happened that it was going to happen because personality would change. And then after she was so sick that she couldn't drink anymore, she would just suffer the consequences of going through withdrawal. And this is a long time ago. I'm an older woman, and this is a long time ago, before there were any programs to go to, before there was any residential treatment or outpatient treatment or any family treatment per se. So it was profound, and we all we were given, with the exception of this experience, which was profound, we had everything that we needed. We just didn't have our mom periodically, and she wasn't there for us during these time periods. So we made do, and basically we learned basically to live with it as it progressed, and we never talked about it. It was ironic that something that was so much a part of our lives, something nobody talked about. As Claudia Black, who is one of the founders of the Adult Children of Alcoholics movement, and also one of the founders of NACoA, wrote when she wrote her book. She called the book, It Will Never Happen to Me. And she called her book, It Will Never Happen to Me, because she too was a child who grew up in a family with a parent with an alcohol use disorder. And she knew she meant the same thing. When I saw the title of the book, I thought, oh my God, that must be what's going on here. So I read the book when it came out. This is 37 years ago. I read the book when it came out, and I thought, my God, the first thing I ever saw that told the truth about what it's like for children who grow up in families with alcoholism. She stated very clearly that the three things that happen in families is the rules that they live under, the unspoken rules. The unspoken rules are don't talk, don't trust, and don't feel. When I saw in that book the unspoken rules in families impacted by addiction, don't talk, don't trust, and don't feel, I thought, wow, there it is. That was how we lived as children. Not about everything, but specifically about the fact that my mother had an alcohol use disorder. We were so intimidated by it and so frightened and wanted to be good kids, didn't want to do anything wrong, because in some ways, because we didn't talk about it, somehow we oftentimes thought maybe we were doing something to make this happen. Maybe this was our fault. So we lived that way, but and the consequences of living and not being able to tell the truth are quite profound for children, for anybody. If you can't talk, you're isolated. We talked amongst ourselves and we talked to our dad, but there was no place to go for help that we knew of back then. So we just we didn't grin, but we bared it, but we lived with it. And a lot of the time, it wouldn't happen. It would not happen more than it would happen. It was sort of like the old woman who lived in the shoe who had so many children, she didn't know what to do. And we assumed that this happened because she was overwhelmed and she couldn't handle everything that she had to deal with, because there were 10 children. We didn't know that she had an illness that was diagnosable and treatable, because nobody ever said that that's what it was. So the consequences of growing up that way have been multiple, but many of these things unspoken in terms of relationships with one another, relationships within our family and friends, not being able to have friends over a lot of the time because we didn't know what it would be like. You couldn't assume on the spur of the moment that everything was going to be okay. We always had to be strategic as children. And we became good at strategizing. We became good. We learned how to live And we didn't ever accept the reality of it. It was too painful because the thing that I always knew as a child, and many of you, I'm sure, know the same thing if you have a parent who's had a substance use disorder, is that, that's not who the person is. And that's not who my mom was. That was what she had. And learning that through NACoA over the years has been such a gift to me, because when growing up, you automatically assume that, well, this is the way it is, and that's who she is. And when you can't make sense of something as a child, you figure out something that makes sense to you. And part of what made sense to us oftentimes is maybe it's because there were too many of us, or maybe it's because it's too much for her. And we would be good, quote unquote, good children, even better than good a lot of the time, because we wanted her to be okay. And our strategizing and behavioral management were not effective, obviously, because there was no treatment for this illness, and we didn't know that that's what it was. So that's my experience through my childhood. And I remember when it was time for me to go to college, I strategized and applied to a college that was about 500 miles away from home. And the rest of the colleges were nearby. And I strategized for a place that was far away so that I could leave, so that I could get out from the distress, and so that I could start to have more of a life of my own as an individual person and not be in the role that I'd been. So I went away to college. And when I was in college, I felt guilty and I was concerned, and I felt like I didn't have a right to be away at college. And after 2 years, came back home and went to a commuter school and graduated. But at the same time as I was back home, where things had progressed and the illness had advanced, I was planning on my next move. And my next move was to do something somewhere that could make a difference. And this is going back a long time ago, as I said. This is when the Peace Corps was founded. And I thought, oh, that's what I'll do. I'll join the Peace Corps and go somewhere in the world and do something that maybe can make a difference. Since childhood, what I did didn't really make a difference because I was a child. I wasn't a healthcare provider, and I didn't know that it was an illness. So I went to live in Cameroon and worked as a Peace Corps volunteer. You can't get much further away than Cameroon, which is on the west coast of Africa. And I stayed there as a volunteer for a couple of years. I had my first experiences with alcohol. And I noticed initially, through college, I hardly ever drank, but I noticed that my reaction to alcohol there was something strange about it. Something happened to me that was confusing, refreshing and confusing, complicated and frightening. And I didn't let myself think that maybe I have the same thing my mom had. But when I came home from Africa, I wound up continuing with my drinking and feeling kind of depressed as a result of the drinking. And then from that, had blackouts. And when I had blackouts, I didn't remember what happened to me when I had alcohol. I realized that this is what had happened to my mom. It was horrible. It was an unbelievably horrible realization. But I continued to drink for a few years, and then fortunately, my mom passed away, and I came into recovery. And I've been in recovery now for over 50 years. And in my recovery, one of the most important things in my life in recovery from having an alcohol use disorder has been learning about how I've been impacted by this illness from the time I was a child. Because just getting sober, that was an amazing experience, of a life-changing experience, and gave me a gift that I treasure. but it gave me a gift I treasure, and it also made it possible for me to have a life of my own. And all through my recovery, I've worked in the field of substance abuse throughout my recovery after my initial time working on getting help for my illness. And one of the main, the foundation of my life, which I just finished describing to you, is also part of the foundation for my recovery and the foundation for the work that I've been doing for many years. And that is learning what the truth is. Recovery is being present and being real and having gratitude, but it's also learning what the truth is. And when you grow up in a family with this illness where the people don't talk and you don't trust and you deny your feelings, there's no way to know the truth. Recovery and the combination of abstaining, learning how to live without alcohol, and working in the field, and the creation of NACoA, which started not too far on in my recovery, were the greatest gifts that I ever received. I was sober, but if I hadn't found NACoA, I might have been in recovery, but the recovery that I have now is not what I would have gotten back then, because I had information about living without alcohol, but I didn't have information about living and telling the truth. And the realization and of awakening that I've been able to experience as a result of the combination of my recovery and also my involvement in NACoA has really been the foundation of my life. I've learned to tell the truth. And I learned about the 7 C's, which is part of the foundation of NACoA. And the 7 C's, which many of you, I'm sure, are aware of, some of you might not know about it. The 7 C's are: I didn't cause it, I can't cure it, I can't control it. I can help take care of myself by communicating my feelings, making healthy choices, and celebrate being me. This information has been so invaluable to me for reference every day of my life in recovery, because I didn't have the information as part of my development as a young person. I believe that I maybe could be held responsible for what happened with my mother's illness. Maybe I was part of the cause, maybe because I wasn't good enough. And I believed in my innocence that maybe there was a way I or my siblings and I could cure it. Maybe we could come up with some magic solution. Maybe if we were better, maybe she'd be okay. But that's not grounded in reality either. And control, which is one of the foundations, one of the major issues in families with this illness. Control, you can't control anything really. I mean, I've learned in my life in recovery about what powerlessness is. And control is the opposite of powerlessness. And powerlessness is the capacity for acceptance and knowing that my first responsibility is to learn how to take care of myself, which fortunately, being a person in recovery, I've been able to learn. And here we are today, we're talking on a webinar about something that has been a really major part of my development. We're communicating, I'm telling the truth. And I chose to be here today. It's a choice that I made. And one thing I know as an adult is that choices have consequences. I never knew that because no one ever really taught me that growing up. I didn't know how to make decisions, how to make choices that made sense. And then fortunately in recovery, I have learned that. And the opportunity to celebrate is part of the gift of having the life that I've been able to have. I celebrate, first of all, being in recovery and having the gifts that I've been given in my life in recovery, including the gift of growing up with the family that I've been fortunate enough to have. A family, we're close, and recovery is an ongoing part of the process of our connections and relationships with one another. It's beautiful. And we have what we have as a result of my experience growing up, partly because I know what it is to live with the pain of someone suffering with this illness. I also know that that's not who the person is, it's what they have. And knowing those things makes a really valuable life possible. So my gratitude is profound, and my appreciation for NACoA is beyond words. NACoA fills in the blank. It takes the emptiness and becomes enfolded in the most precious, invaluable information for people who've come from families that have been impacted by this illness. The access to materials and the goodness and the kindness of people from NACoA, going back historically to when they started it, is just an amazing gift. One of my concern as someone who's worked in the recovery field for many years is an ongoing one, and I've tried to take action in response to, and that is there are very limited services and resources for children who come from families with this illness. There were back when I was a child, obviously, but it's still the same. It's a cultural phenomenon. I don't know if it's based on shame. I don't know how it happened, but I know that hiding in plain sight are so many children who are impacted by this illness. I know that, and NACoA offers the gifts of solutions within our culture to issues that children have that they could get help with while they're in school. If there were programs such as, there's a program that's available as a resource through NACoA called Help is Down the Hall. It's a guideline for bringing the information about the impact of this illness on children into schools. And there's information in the children's kits about doing supportive education groups with children, engaging them, teaching them what the rules are they live under, and teaching them how to not break the rules without getting hurt or hurting anybody else themselves, which is really a very important consideration for them to have. And NACoA teaches children what safety is. Many children live in homes with this illness activated. They don't know they know something's wrong, but they don't realize the profound sort of the anxiety they experience is because they're afraid that something bad is going to happen, and something bad is happening because of the nature of this illness. So my life has really been touched by NACoA in a way that I appreciate having the opportunity to share my gratitude about with everyone who's involved in listening to this presentation right now. And I wish you all well. I wish you all, I hope you all know what the rules are that you might be living under. And I really strongly recommend that you learn how to break the rules, the don't talk, don't trust, and don't feel rules, and learn how to celebrate and value yourselves and own yourselves and allow yourselves to be all that you can possibly be, despite the profound impact of having had to survive um, such a powerful illness. So my thanks to you for being here, and I want to thank NACoA, and I want to thank Mary Beth, everyone involved with NACoA, and my special love goes to Sis Wang